Well, hi, and welcome back to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So, we want to talk today about when opposites attract until they don't.
Or when they don't.
When they don't, yeah, that's a better phrase. So, this has been some discussion I think that you and I have engaged in independently during the course of the past few days. And as we got together to brainstorm about what topic we wanted to choose for today, we both vocalized the same theme, but with a slightly different flavor about it. And so I think this is an important one because we have a lot of phrases that are out in our community. There are a lot of common perceptions, and I think we need to just address them head on because, as we tend to do, we will have a judgment about something based on common phrases, common understandings that maybe we need to dissect a little bit so that we can get out of a judgmental mindset and have one of curiosity.
Sometimes one of the phrases I love is wisdom is in the definition of terms. Well, the definition of people also, and the definition of what they feel about us, which is often missed on our part. We make assumptions. We use inference, and sometimes that inference is wrong. We need to be open to that.
For sure. When you hear the phrase opposites attract, what's the very first thing that comes to mind?
Marriage.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because in my experience, many of the best marriages I know, the people are very opposite. Now, opposite in that one loves to take care of the checkbook and one hates it. One loves to cook, one does not. One loves to, do various chores, one does not. And that makes for a nice yin-yang in that if both people don't, things are going to suffer.
Right.
Or one person has to do, and the old phrase of, I like to do things that I'm right-handed, and I don't like to do things I'm left-handed, kind of right-handed, left-handed. There's only so many things I want to tolerate that I'm going to try to do left-handed.
Sure.
If I'm good at something, or if I like to do something, and sometimes that's a big correlation or overlap, then I don't mind doing them. And things that I don't feel like I'm good at, or things that I think are tedious, then I don't want to do. And so, but I also think it's from a thought perspective too. If you look at the 5 Voices by Giant, you look at the creative connector, and the creative connector's complete opposite is the guardian. And a real good phrase for that is the guardian would say, well, Gary, it's always going to take you longer to redo something than just plan it well and do it right the first time. And me as the creative connector, I'm going to say, no, let's just get going. I'll fix things as I go along.
Right. It's
not that either one is wrong. They're just different. And if you have 2 people together who have the same goals, well, then it's actually good to have those 2 different perspectives because then everything you do is going to be a higher quality. And if you're trying to get support from a large group of people, you'll be able to relate to both the guardians and the creative connectors unless one is dominated.
Yeah. I feel like this is going to be a pretty significant topic that we'll probably do in 2 different episodes. So do you want to focus on business or on marriage?
I didn't realize that was a choice.
Well, I just made it up right now.
Or the business of marriage. So to me, relationships are relationships, and business is relationships, and so is marriage. So that's a tough one. So you take it away and go whatever way you want to go.
All right. I do want to tackle marriage, but we'll do that in our part 2. I want to do business right now because I think you just opened up some really interesting thoughts about work relationships and what happens when you are paired with your opposite on a work team. Let's talk about that for a moment because there's a few things that can happen. First, you can just feel that you're totally being rubbed the wrong way because you're working with somebody that is so different in the way that they think and operate. But then there's also the times that maybe there's a little fire that gets lit because maybe you're even trying to prove the point wrong or trying to succeed where somebody else is questioning your processes. And so let's talk about what does it look like to have a healthy relationship in a work dynamic with somebody who's your opposite.
I think we've all said in a business setting, well, these questions that they have that, are irritating, but they make me better. And sometimes that's said sincerely, and sometimes that's said tongue in cheek, and sometimes it's pure sarcasm. But I think everyone understands that if there's a little bit of different thinking around, that's better. I remember when Myers-Briggs first came out, it's been around for centuries, but first became a big deal in corporate culture. And I was a young engineering manager at Intel in the early 80s. And we did a Myers-Briggs, and it turned out that everybody on our little fab leadership was ESTJs. And so we went around looking for people to add that were INFPs so that we could have a different perspective and make sure that that different perspective was related in our decision making and in the things that we would roll out. Because a bunch of ESTJs, and I don't remember what ESTJ even stands for, but they're going to roll over people, right? Unless we have different perspectives. And so we actually went and looked for that. Now, once we found it, we weren't necessarily always happy that we found that, because it seemed like things would take longer.
Sure.
But what's the old saying? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people.
Right.
And the more people with diverse thinking, the better.
So right away, I start thinking through past work relationships that have had lots of friction in them. Maybe it's an immediate supervisor, maybe it's somebody that's working under you, or even, with you as a direct coworker, colleague. And there are those really uncomfortable times where, to me, my natural thought process is, well, I wish I could just do this by myself. I wish I didn't have to work with somebody else. It takes a mental and an emotional effort to work in conjunction with somebody that you're just not jiving with. And I think that is, for me, one of the most challenging places for me to stop the judgmental attitude and really get into it with curiosity, because there are certain characteristics that tend to just make me crazy. And rather than me adopting a posture of curiosity about why does this person operate this way, or why is it that this is their MO, I have my own internal narrative, and I am very quick to jump to judgment. And so this for me is one of the hardest categories for me to kind of practice what we preach, so to speak.
Okay, well, let's practice some curiosity, not judgment, around that.
Yep.
Why do you think that is, and what could we do about it?
Why does it make me so crazy?
Why do you think that two people that are opposite have friction, and what can we do about it?
Well, I think they have friction because we want things to go the way that we want them to go.
In general?
In general. And if somebody operates in a different manner, they're probably by default or by definition doing things different than we want them to go.
I mean, I used to really have the thinking in my head at one point in my life, I'm not proud of this, that, if the world would work a lot better if everyone would just listen to me. And the corollary to that is anybody who doesn't think the same way I do is a little off base or a lot off base.
Right.
And, and I think we all think that way. We're not usually transparent enough to say it out loud. But oftentimes we are in a situation where we feel like we have the vision, we know what needs to be done, and why can't the other person see it? So what is our responsibility in that situation?
Well, I think we have to be very purposeful to both communicate our why, but also to draw out the other person's why.
I love that part. So when I was in the mayor's office, one of the things that was notable about my political career is that we had a 9-person city council, and I would strive to get 9-0 votes, and 5 were one party and 4 were another, right? And that was unusual, and that was a personal challenge for me. And I would take each of the city councilors out in their district for lunch at least once a quarter and tell them my heart, tell them my why. And I'm happy to say that most of my votes were 9-0. A couple were 8-0 because the person had such respect they didn't want to say no. So they abstained. I think that it's not as hard. We seem to, in this day and age, to just kind of, have our camps and think that, if somebody, I don't even evaluate something because on the merits of the actual thing that we're talking about. I evaluate it based on who said it. And that's not going to work, right? In that situation. So what you say is really good. If you can get an alignment of the whys, and there's certain things I think we can do to do that. Number one, check out, are you for me? Are we for each other? Right? Are we for each other as people? Can we start there?
Yeah.
And then are we for each other in our current roles? Are we for each other? By the way, if the answer is no, then there's other problems.
Sure.
And you may never see eye to eye on things. But boy, if the answer is yes, then sometimes conflicts can melt away. If I know you're for me, then I'm willing to put up with quite a lot. It's the old, my best friend versus my worst enemy says the same thing. I'm going to hear it from my best friend.
Right.
I'm going to dismiss it from my worst enemy. So that's one thing to do towards that, alignment of whys.
All right, I want to go back to the city council example for a moment because I think this is very important. I think it's maybe of interest to folks that are concerned about things happening in their community. Maybe you don't work for city government, and so it's not that level of relationship, but maybe you have, a bill that's been presented you disagree with, or a bill you want presented that you feel strongly about. How in the world do you get that unity of whys, or even have the conversation with a city councilor? You had a unique position where they knew you were in the mayor's office, you got that chance to sit down once a quarter. But for the general populace, this is part of, to me, one of the biggest frustrations around politics and how everything has become so polarized. If we are bringing it back down to the city level and we've got opportunity to have conversations with city councilors, how do we have that initial assessment of who is for you and who is not for you?
That's a great point. Now you've transitioned, by the way, from coworkers to people that you may not even know. But let's go there because I think it is important. I think a lot of people are frustrated with politics. And remember, politics from the Latin root polite means for the people. We misuse that word these days. We say, "Oh, I don't like the politics of this situation," or "This is just about the politics." The real word politics means for the people. The reason why we elect political leaders is because we expect them to be for the people, representing the people in their esteemed office. So in that case, if you want something to happen down at City Hall, going to each of the councilors to figure that out. Now, we're in a strong mayor system, so you can either go to the city councilors or you can go to the mayor. There's other things at play here, but let's say you want to go to the city councilors. Going to the ones that you agree with is easy, and sometimes that's a good way to go. I would sometimes do that to start to hone my arguments. Go where the easy ones are, and then say, what do you think the objections will be? Then I am now prepared to go to the folks that I think are going to be against me. Now, what I often figured out to do is to change up the language. Sometimes we get so stuck. We hear a certain language or a certain phrase, and it is out of hand. I dismiss it. Right. I've thought about that. My party has told me I'm against that. My family, my whatever group has told me I'm against that. I'm against that. So change up the language in a way that we don't invoke that paradigm, and then say, okay, well, would you be for this? Would you be for that? What's your opinion on how, or what's your tactic for how we're addressing this issue? And then again, and this is the second part, finding common ground, finding common goals. Well, if we could do this and we got to this goal, would you? Well, yeah, but that doesn't go far enough. Okay, but can we do baby steps? Is this something that at least we can start going down the path and judge the efficacy of this, which might help us get to the next level later? Is that a way to go? Anyway, these are things to. First of all, one of the things that policymakers get a lot of is a lot of different voices yelling at them in different things about the same item. And they're vastly different opinions about the same thing. And I think it's very difficult on the policymakers to really delve into something and really understand something well enough when they've got a lot of people just yelling at them saying, I've got the answer, do this. And so understand that that's the position that they're in, first of all, and say, okay, look, I'd love to know where you're currently standing on this, and where do you think this is going? Where do you think this is a way? Is there some one little thing we could get done here? And then grab onto that if you think we can, and then how do we get support from others on this? We're going down a little bit of a political rat hole here, but I would say that public discourse and that whole, we've talked about this before, dialogue, dialogos, meaning moving through, as opposed to discussion, which is the same root of percussion and concussion and means hurling ideas at each other. If we had more dialogue, and that's how you get to what's our common why, what is our common ground, what's our common goals, and how do you know my heart and your heart? Because, you know, there was a classic business problem that you used to get in the early business school, and that was, okay, you've got this fruit that is very important to this group of people for this thing and this group of people for this thing. And you delve into it more, and one needs it for a medicine or people will die, and one needs it for food or people will starve to death. And then when you really, really, really peel it back, what it turns out, if you ask enough questions, is that the people who need it for the vaccine need the peel, and the people who need it for food need the fruit. So you can satisfy both with the same thing, and you can get to a true win-win. There are many people who would posit, who would submit that if you are committed to a win-win arrangement or solution, and you just say, I am committed to a win-win. Are you? You are committed to a win-win. If we sit here long enough, we can come up with one. It takes suspending some of our prior beliefs. It takes listening. It takes empathy. It takes a lot of work, but it's there.
Yeah. I know we did go down a bit of a political rabbit trail, but I think much of what you're suggesting absolutely works in the employment realm.
Sure.
You know, especially when you're dealing with maybe administration or you're dealing with leadership. Maybe they're not as easily approachable or accessible as your same level peers or those working beneath you. And so maybe it is much the same mentality as if you were trying to make an appointment to get in to see a city councilor or something along those lines. And oftentimes people of, you know, high position don't have the time to sit down until there's a win-win accomplished. So what's the next best thing?
Well, I mean, this is the whole bane of compromise, right? And some people would say, well, compromise is the worst thing that could happen because neither person gets what they want and nobody gets what they want. But the art of compromise toward a win-win solution is often the only way you're going to get there. Finding out what's really important versus just the platitudes and the slogans and the rhetoric, I think is really the only way to make progress, because, you know, two groups of people standing yelling at each other is not going to get you anywhere. It's going to take some true dialogue. But I guess the root of all of this is there are different ways to communicate with people who you lead, with people who are your peers, and with people who are above you or are in a different situation of power with respect to you. And I think taking a little bit of time about what does that group or person need from you? What could you do to provide what they need from you? Do they just need information so they can make their own decision? Do they need your support? Do they need to know that you're for them, which goes a long way in these situations? Do they need your advocacy and help with spreading some ideas with other groups? I'm not great at this, but when I do it, it's effective, and that is, what does that person I've got friction with need from me? What do they need? Do they need a process? Is there no process? Are we both wandering around and I'm just saying I want this done and this person's saying, yeah, but I don't know how to get it done? It's okay. Okay, how about we come up with a process that we can both agree on? And then we can do that. And this person signs off and then we go check here and then we do this. Or how can we get to a way that we can proceed and at least get some forward momentum going?
I want to bring up one last question, and it's probably all that we're going to have time for today. But how do you show somebody of authority that you are for them? And I'll give maybe two different scenarios. We're back to, talking to a congressional delegate, but you're not in their district. So you're not going to vote for them. There's no being for them in the sense of you're not a voter that's going to help them, be reelected. Or you're talking to a supervisor who, you're just a peg in the system. Of course they want you to do a good job, but really you're disposable. And so how do you, as this, disposable person, show the supervisor that you're for them in a manner that attributes value to what you want to say?
I have a new goal, disposable person. Hopefully no one's disposable, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
So, one of the ways to do that is to find out one of the things that they're struggling with. A great curiosity, not judgment question is, what are you struggling with right now? What's causing you pain? If you can find something that you can help them out with that's causing them pain or causing them struggle, then that's useful to them no matter whose district you're in, or that's useful to them no matter where you are on the COG list. And oftentimes there are things you can do to help them. You can help them formulate ideas. You can help them with a goal that does help their constituents or does help them proceed in some ways. You can be a sounding board for ideas in a no judgment way. There's a lot of people that need that right now.
That's true.
And you have to prove that and gain trust. But I think there's a lot of things. But here's the thing: it's back to the diagnose before you prescribe. Try not to go in thinking you know what they need. Ask questions. What do you need? I get in trouble with this all the time when I forget to do it. If you walk in and you think a group needs something, and you've dealt with this with the homeless and others, and I think you need food, right? It seems obvious, but what do you really need? Maybe you need transportation, maybe you need this, and then you could provide your own food. Maybe there's other things. Rarely do we think we're going to try to help somebody. Do we ask enough, what do you need? What do you think you need? What do you think is the way to do this?
And I'm going to pause and make sure that we explain this clearly, that the preferred method of communication when asking these questions is vocally. Because if you do this through text or through email, everyone reads tone of voice into what they're reading.
That's
and
right.
So if you think about the statement, what is your pain point? If you're going to, well, what's your pain point?
Yeah.
What is your pain point?
Right.
You can make the inflection however you choose as you're reading something. And so when you're asking, these are pretty, I'm going to say, intimate questions, right? Because it's trying to cut to the heart of what is troubling somebody. And so tone of voice makes all the difference in the world.
And motivation. And we judge others by their actions and ourselves by our motivations. You need to display to someone that you're for them legitimately, so that they can trust you with a transparent answer.
Yeah. So rather than shooting off a text to somebody, what's your pain point? I'd say maybe a conversation over lunch might get you a whole lot further.
Lunch, cup of coffee. Some people don't have time for any of that. And you just have to say, can I just get 5 minutes?
Yeah.
And that's tough these days, right? And there's a lot of people who build up walls, especially if you're in a political position. You end up building up walls because you just cannot handle all the input that there is. So you try to get a good person who's in that role. We'll try to get various people who can kind of conglomerate different viewpoints and represent them to you, because the unfortunate part of it is you can't listen to everyone.
That's true. Well, you can make an honest attempt, but you're going to have to ultimately make a decision based on the voices that have impacted you the most.
I'll never forget city council meetings, which I sat through 4 years of, and people would complain, why does public comment, why do we each only get 2 minutes? Well, because we're trying to listen to everyone. Well, 2 minutes isn't enough. Well, then would you rather we listen to no one? I mean, it's a tough problem.
Sure. Absolutely. All right, this is a good time to wrap this episode up, but we want to continue on with this thought process of opposites attract, or do they? And we will always, of course, love to hear your feedback through whatever platform you want to reach us, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or any of the channels that you're watching or viewing this on. Feel free to leave us a comment. You can also do it directly on the website, curiositynotjudgment.com. By the way, I did buy a second URL with Judgment spelled without the extra E, and now it is redirected back to the original page. So regardless of how you spell Judgment, the British English or the American English way, you should find us online.
Good luck.
So until next time, have a great week.
Take care.